Welcome back to the channel. This is Trinity Storm and you are watching second part of What If Naruto Was Infected by an Alien Virus. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe to the channel. Now wasting no more time, let's start the story.
As the Hokage began the last section of the second exam, Naruto observed. As the Hokage explained the purpose of the exams, she did not really pay attention, since she was already aware of it. In the last section of the exams, they were to be publicly displayed as evidence that the village had a bright future. As she turned to look around, she saw Veronica sitting in a dark cornfield off to the side. Naruto hadn't been there when she spoke with the Hokage, but it appeared that she had made the decision to remain for a few weeks at this point. Then, as each team approached the balconies to clear the arena for the fights, she turned to face the other teams. Her team was not one of the three teams. There were also teams from the Leaf, the Sound, and the Sand. In case she was selected first, she glanced quickly around the arena. Everyone gathered on the spacious balcony to observe the action. There were no hiding spots because the arena was level. The only real object in the arena was a big statue that was forming a simple hand signal to call Charka out at the end of the space. When the names on the board flashed, Naruto looked up and saw that Sasuke's name was the first to appear, followed by hers. She heard gasps from everyone in the arena when they realized who was fighting from the Leaf. With a sigh, she dismissed the idea and made her way to the combat zone. Since she was certain that the Hokage did not want to see her face Sasuke just yet, she was certain that someone had rigged the board. The Leaf Genin and Jonin were arguing over who would win around the room. With a few exceptions, everyone seemed to believe Naruto would lose handily. However, Hinata, the Hokage, and Naruto's squad all appeared to believe that Naruto would prevail. Not only that, but one person was unaware that the board could be rigged if necessary. Naruto had heard some rather unpleasant rumors, so the Hokage had made it so that he would face Sasuke. It appeared that Sasuke had recently received the curse seal and had grown quite erratic. Furthermore, the Hokage believed it would be best if Sasuke was excluded from the Chunin exams until he was certain he was sane and mentally stable. And since Naruto was present, he believed that was the least dangerous approach to take without endangering other genin or creating a commotion. Since he had ensured that Naruto and her team's training was nearly the best available, he was certain of that. Before long, Sasuke and Naruto were facing one another in the arena. Sasuke appeared tense, but Naruto appeared at ease. He was no longer familiar with Naruto's abilities, and when her cloak was closed, it concealed every part of her body save her head. The curse seal on his neck was another concern. It was pulsing slowly, and if it activated in any way, Kakashi would intervene and end the match. Which would probably mean that he would have to lose and would not be allowed to take the exam. Ibiki, the examiner, gave each of them one more look before nodding and saying, "Remember, I said stop, and you stop. Anyone disobeying this rule will have you removed from the exam and in my examination room before you can say just do." Even the Jonin stiffened a little bit at those words, and the room seemed to drop a few degrees. Naruto nodded. Thanks to Anko, he had grown accustomed to the way Ibiki spoke. "Yes, understood, sir." Even more tense than before, Sasuke replied, "Yes, sir," since it seemed like everything was against him. Ibiki said, "Good, begin," then leapt back. Without delay, Sasuke began by making a series of hand gestures and then brought his hand to his mouth to blow. A fireball the size of him shot out from him, but Naruto was able to avoid it easily because it wasn't as big as the one Sasuke typically used. Wincing, Sasuke growled to himself that the curse seal was interfering with his ability to control his Charka. Nevertheless, he did not have much time to fret about this because Naruto's hand shot forward, encircling it with a blade made of Charka. Sasuke immediately sidestepped, ducking beneath it before punching forward. Sasuke had gotten past her defenses, and Naruto was just barely able to deflect it. As soon as Naruto had the opportunity, she leapt back before she could take any action. Again, Sasuke was after her. Now that his speed had increased, Naruto was finding it easier to keep up with him and even surpass him because her speed had increased even more. With her hands still covered in Charka, she managed to repel him with some extremely quick stables while evading all of his other blows. However, it didn't seem like this was helping them because Sasuke's defense appeared to be superior to his offense. Activating his eyes, Sasuke decided to up the ante in the battle after noticing that the seal appeared to be settling down a bit for the time being. Or at least attempted to, because as soon as he turned them on, the seal flared even more painfully than before, making him pause in mid-attack. He was exposed for a brief period of time as a result. Upon noticing this, Naruto did not waste any time in using her chakra-made blades to sever Sasuke's arms. Then, with her style, she leapt back to see what had happened. There were 3 distinct applications for their style. The first style was a little slow, but its main selling point was its offensive power. They sharpened their claws by wrapping charca around them, and because charca is acidic, even a small scratch would hurt someone severely. It made it such that a single hit or glance could be problematic. This one didn't involve any footwork because their tails were mostly utilized for blocking and maintaining balance instead of being used for running. They could kill someone with their charca if enough got inside of them, so it was a death by 1,000 cuts. Leaving the style as their most potent, but if an opponent managed to evade their strikes, they were left with little choice except to leap aside. The second one had equal attack and defense and was specifically designed for their claws. It was modeled after Kiba's fighting style, in which they would swat at their opponents with their claws, tearing or cutting their bodies apart. They could almost kill someone with a single swipe if they got a good shot. Usually, a poor shot leaves the recipient with some cuts. A single blow was intended to destroy an opponent, so this style did not employ their charca nearly as much. In other words, their charca would not have much of an impact unless they were glanced at. They would therefore attack and block with swipes using their feet, hands, and tails. The last one used only a few strategic strikes and was essentially defensive. For strikes, it once more employed their charca, but in a different manner. The attacks would concentrate on a few areas rather than a large area. Since the main locations were the heart, lungs, and head, hitting these areas could result in almost instantaneous death. If not, it would undoubtedly cause excruciating pain. However, other sites that were utilized were the principal charca veins. It fully utilized their tail as a surprise attack, which, if executed with sufficient surprise, could be the means of killing a person. Haku and Naruto preferred the third approach. Tenten liked the second one better because it was more balanced. Anko, on the other hand, preferred the first since it was less messy and resulted in more blood and pain. Sasuke fell to the ground in agony, and Naruto witnessed it. Although the blow was only superficial in nature, Sasuke's arm bore a large charca vein that was struck by it. And for that reason, the blow hurt him even more than the cursed seal had. A random thought occurred to Naruto, and he wondered if he could break the cursed seal the way he had Anko's. He was about to move forward when Sasuke grabbed the back of his shirt and pulled it down slightly, exposing the seal around his neck. Before piercing the seal with the charca blade, the reformed it. Her blade sliced deep into the seal, sending Naruto flying backwards and landing a few feet away as he watched Sasuke warily. Now lying on the ground, unable to move, Sasuke felt pain unlike anything he had ever experienced. A wave of charca shot out from the seal, sending Naruto hurtling through the air and causing Sasuke to thrash about. Unbeknownst to Sasuke, the seal was currently being dyed by Naruto charca. Like it would with any other seal, Naruto charca was eating away at the seal, destroying it in a matter of seconds and releasing a significant amount of charca that it contained. As everyone looked on in disbelief, Naruto had first defeated the Uchiha youth with ease. And now that she was on her last assault, this strange thing was occurring. The seal then completely vanished with an ear-piercing scream. Ibiki called the match in Naruto's favor, but Sasuke was too close to pass out from the pain as he lay on the ground, panting. After entering, 2 medics removed Sasuke. They brought Naruto along, and the Hokage and Kakashi followed quickly, curious to find out what had caused this strange display of charca. The board spun through the options once more before slowly slowing down to a stop, giving Ibiki the all clear to proceed. Ino versus Kiba. As Ino descended the stairs, Kiba leapt to the ground, and the two of them stood facing each other, waiting for the signal to start. Ibiki offered it and leapt back once more. The fight proved to be very brief as Kiba punched Ino before Ino could react, shooting forward quickly. She was knocked off balance by the punch and hit the wall hard before collapsing. Kiba was declared the winner after Ibiki shook his head, amazed at how she had progressed this far. Before turning to face his team again, Kiba chuckled and remarked that it was too simple. The board then whirled into motion once more, showing the competitors who was next. Kin versus Conquero. Before taking on their rivals, they both walked across the arena. After giving each a quick glance, Ibiki nodded and said, "Begin." Without wasting any time, Kin threw a lot of senbon at Conquero, who avoided it by just cocking his head. Before turning to face Kin again, he had noticed the bells on them and said, "So senbon with bells. I don't think they're to help me dodge." Kin grinned and threw more senbon, forcing Conquero to dodge even more. "What a clever boy you are, but that does mean you will win against me." He had to let go of the bulky wrap package in order to dodge more quickly. After a senbon nicked Conquero's clothes, Kin laughed and the man stopped moving. With a sly smile piercing his face, Conquero remarked, "Well, none you can throw senbon semi-well I can see. But you lack anything skills it seems as well." Kin said, "Oh really, then you were wrong guessing that," and then he pulled, causing some of the senbon's bells to ring. With a sly grin, Conquero said, "I see now genjutsu using your bells to cast it. Sadly for you, that is useless against me." Kunai then flew from his hands, easily severing the wires and stopping the ringing. As soon as Kin realized how quickly she had been discovered, she threw several more senbon at Conquero, but they bounced off of him rather than really entering his body, shocking nearly everyone, save for his teammates and one sensei. Turning around, Conquero gave Kin a grin while speaking without opening his mouth. With that, a blade emerged from Conquero's hand and he shot forward, saying, "So you noticed I cannot be touched by normal weapons." Kin attempted to sidestep, but her leg was ensnared by the blade. "By the way, did I mention that all of my weapons have poison on them?" Grinned Conquero as he came to a stop not far from her. Kin fell to her knees, gasping as the anguish overwhelmed her body and the world went dark. There was a puff of smoke surrounding Conquero, and he grinned. After taking out his blade, he approached Kin and said, "Good game." Without turning around, Conquero left as Kin started to lose consciousness due to the poisoning. Ibiki declared the match in Conquero's favor after hastily checking for any genjutsu that might still be present and then checking Kin. Silently, the medical ninja arrived and took Kin away to receive treatment for the poisoning. Again, the board whirled through the names. The name of the next match appeared on it. Gaara vs Hinata. Now, with concern in her eyes, Naruto turned to face Hinata, who was standing close to her squad. Hinata appeared as though she would soon pass out, and Shino and Kiba appeared as though they were going to have a heart attack. As Hinata lifted her voice from her spot down to address the proctor, "I forfeit," the tension was broken. Gaara knew she wouldn't be much of a challenge, but she still looked at her with a hint of resentment. During the second exam section, he had easily sensed them and felt their fear. He knew that right now, killing them wouldn't be enjoyable or even worthwhile. To Temari's and Conquero's dismay, he continued to lean against the wall, appearing bored, despite their expectations that he would be furious about not receiving any blood. As soon as the board spun once more to reveal the upcoming competitors, Ibiki nodded and said, "As you wish, Gaara is the winner. Haku vs Temari." Upon witnessing this, Temari let out a sigh and made his way downstairs, while Haku simply shrugged and leapt from the balcony. The Hokage and Kakashi reappeared looking a little shaken as they made their way into the center of the arena and took their places, but Naruto appeared to be the same. It appeared that any type of seal could be broken by Naruto's chakra and those of his team. The possibilities and ideas they had for that were enormous, but they also presented a great deal of difficulty because they were unable to determine why Kyuubi's seal was still in place or whether or not it would break. "Are you both ready?" Ibiki asked, glancing between them and receiving a nod in response. "Okay, start again," he said. In contrast to the first few games, neither of them initially moved. They were both observing one another in an attempt to determine what the other was capable of. In this regard, Haku was a little more successful than Temari. Though neat, Temari could only speculate based on what she had witnessed Naruto do, which was still insufficient to create a strategy for combat. Haku, however, was able to determine that Temari was a Wind Just You user and had a battle fan. She would most likely move much more slowly than most genin as a result of this. Haku waited a full 20 seconds to initiate contact. She swiftly and forcefully threw some senbon at Temari, but they were abruptly knocked out of the air. Haku scowled after giving a small smirk. Temari was indeed a wind user, as she had previously realized, but her speed was significantly faster. One moon showing when, Temari smirked at her, and once all three are showing this match will be over for you. Haku sighed. I very much doubt that wind user. I know perfectly well how you blocked my attack. And that attack was only meant to test your speed. Temari gave a slight growl, hoping that no one would discover her secret just yet. However, it wasn't a significant loss in the end. Temari easily sent a blast of air across the arena by whipping the fan around and opening it fully. Haku was struck exactly, but it appeared to have no effect other than to tangle her hair and slightly shift her cloak. Haku asked, "Please, is that all you have?" Not feeling impressed. "Hardly, I think I am going to like playing with you," Temari said, waving her fan once more but adding some charca to it. Haku was easily propelled into the air by the blast, but some blood leaked out of her cheeks, hands, and feet due to the wind's slight cuts. And because of the wind, the droplets flew, bouncing off the floor and walls. A hissing sound caught Temari's attention, and she quickly turned to check if there was an explosive node nearby. She turned to face Haku, who smiled, but she could not see anyone. "You should really be more careful with your attacks against me. My blood is in no ways normal," Haku stated. Temari gave her a close look and saw that the cuts were green rather than crimson. "So what, you have a bloodline, big deal?" Haku said, flicking her finger with a drop of blood on it and using charca to make it reach Temari. "Actually, it is not that. My blood could kill a person in a drop." Temari was taken aback when the drop struck her fan on the metal and instantly went through it as if it were not there. Temari swallowed, appearing almost alarmed at her newfound dilemma. "So what are you going to do? Help me with drops and kill me?" "Nope, just warning you, if any of my blood gets on anything it will melt since my blood is a very powerful acid. And since I don't want anyone else to get hurt, I figure I warn you so you would not use some of you powerful wind attacks that might send my blood flying around," Haku said with a small grin. They had made a point, she could tell even if Temari did not respond to what she said. Temari had started to notice the holes in the floors and walls where Haku's blood had come into contact. Everyone, with the exception of Team 7, was chatting among themselves up on the balcony. To put it mildly, having blood like that was terrifying, but what was even more terrifying was that it could dissolve through anything. The blood on Haku's clothing was not melting it, they realized at that point. Temari took notice as well. "If what you say is true, then why don't your clothes melt?" "They were made to withstand this acid with a seal thanks to some friends. Because to be honest, I would rather remain clothed while fighting someone," Haku said with an even tone. Temari remarked, "Fair enough," knowing that she could protect herself from the acid if it came her way if she could get her hands on the cloak that covered Haku. She also understood that, given that they occasionally sent blood everywhere, using all of her powerful wind-based justice would not be a good idea. Positively, though, she still possessed a vast array of attacks at her disposal. She tried to knock Haku out cold by sending a burst of air at her with another swing of her fan. But Haku quickly sidestepped and raced in Temari's direction. Before Temari could swing her fan far enough for a second shot at Haku, Haku closed the distance between them. After narrowly avoiding Haku's attack, Temari put her fan back together in a closed form and swung it at her in the hopes of scaring her away. It nearly worked, but Haku executed a backflip, allowing the fan to pass effortlessly over her. As Temari swung the fan to remove Haku's hands, Haku completed his transition from a back bend to a handstand and finally a handspring. She leapt to avoid Temari's windburst that was directed towards her as she landed. She continued to dodge easily until she was standing next to Temari once more. Temari swung her fan at Haku once more, but Haku stopped it with her hand before it could get much momentum. Haku grabbed the fan from Temari and said, "You know, you are really starting to be a pain." Then Haku spun, opening it completely as she went, propelling charca into the wall of wind that was forming around her. Then the wall of wind blew out in all directions, throwing Temari backward and cutting her with the wind. As Haku threw the fan aside, she gave him a furious, pointed look. "How do you use that thing? It is way too big and bulky for good use by a real ninja." Temari growled and said, "Like you would know, I bet you just pushed charca into it hoping it would work." She was in a difficult situation now that she didn't have her fan and didn't really have any useful master. She was startled when Haku took a tiny battle fan out of each sleeve of her robe. Haku shot forward without wasting any more time, saying, "You should really have thought about that more. I actually can use wind-based attacks, but I don't normally show it. And now it is time to end this." She appeared in a burr next to Temari. Temari followed her instincts and ducked. For a brief moment, she felt the wind stirring above her as she ducked. Temari turned to see what had happened as Haku came to a stop behind her. A thin, barely perceptible slice had formed on the floor along the angle Haku had swung her fan. Temari started to turn and charge at Haku, but she was forced to stop when she felt something sharp against her neck. Then, as Haku turned on a second blade to encircle her fans, she felt the wind stir behind her. With a tone that was almost evil, Haku said, "Give and I will not kill you," and a gasp went up throughout the room. For fear of having her head severed, Temari did not nod. "Fine, I forfeit." With a nod, Ibiki said, "Haku winner by forfeit." Temari removed the object from her neck and stepped back, massaging it. She was amazed as she gazed at Haku and then saw the tail. It had a jagged, menacing looking blade on it, and Temari scratched her neck, wondering aloud as to why she was still alive. She moved to her hand and opened it, grinning as she saw that there was absolutely no damage. Haku spotted this as she approached. "How come your fan is still okay? Anything my charka touches when released through just you or something else normally destroys it. Even my fans need special seal to stay in one piece." "Well, my fan is a way for me to summon, so it is harder to destroy than most," Temari said without turning to face her. She walked back up to the balcony after Haku nodded and said, "Oh, I see now. Good match." When Temari saw that her cuts were a little larger than when they had first placed her on, she paused, walking in her direction for a short while. And the gash in the earth, which had only been a quarter of an inch earlier, had grown to almost an inch in diameter. She experienced severe vertigo all of a sudden and passed out. After rushing in to stabilize Temari, the medics removed her from the scene and placed her on a stretcher. The names stunned Guy's and Enko's teams as the board spun into action once more before stopping. At that point, Ibiki yelled, "Will Tenten and Neji please enter the arena?" Neji and Tenten made their way from their teams to the arena, where they found themselves talking spots on the floor across from one another. The protector allowed them to begin, and Neji's only action was to slide into a stance. After a short while, Tenten said, "Neji, you should give up now." Neji's eyes only slightly widened. Before she left his team, he was positive he could defeat her at any time in a battle. However, that was only because he could easily dodge and attack her, because she employed a lot of weapons and her attacks were somewhat predictable. He realized he could still defeat Lee even if her abilities had changed. If that were the case, he might not be as fortunate. A Taijutsu warrior with speed comparable to that of almost any non-Jin level ninja. Thinking about this, he spoke, his expression returning to his usual one, saying, "I doubt Tenten fate has decided that it shall be my victory today." Tenten sighed in response, saying, "You might believe that, but destiny isn't always correct. Neji, be ready. I am not who you believe me to be." She lunged ahead, launching an assault on Neji. With lightning speed, she swung her clawed hands into Neji, forcing him to duck back or else lose a piece of himself. Though Tenten was unable to sustain the attacks for very long, they had accomplished her goal and forced Neji into an unnatural stance. She continued to block attacks with her tail, but Neji's complete hand blocking prevented her from landing a blow. However, Neji was able to find a gap as she completely missed one of her attacks. He was able to attack her and hit specific areas on both arms in an attempt to seal Tenten Charka points. Tenten merely grinned as she sprinted forward for a brief moment, cutting Neji's arms 8 times before she leapt back. Neji winced, looking at his arms as he was made to jump back. Tenten said, "Really Neji, you should not have done that," holding up her hand, which was now completely covered in charka that was gradually growing into claws. Neji said, wincing as the cuts she had sustained from her charka were starting to get bigger. "What is going on that should have shut your charka points, making it so you could not use charka?" she asked. "To put it simply, my teammates' personalities are acidic, much like my charka." Tenten slid back into an anko like stance and said, "So when you sent your charka in to block my points, I sent my charka towards those points, destroying your chakra and forcefully reopening them. It appears that I will need to change up my style. If not, I fear that this will take a little longer than I would like." Neji was instantly prepared for anything, but when Tenten's tail suddenly emerged from under his cloak and headed straight for his heart, he was taken aback. Neji attempted to sidestep it by leaping backwards, but the tail's sheer length and speed proved too much, causing it to snail his arms instead. Glancing down at his arms, Neji's too long, deep cuts were still there, puncturing the other wounds as well. Tenten smirked and said, "Give up, Neji, before I am forced to remove your arms. My victory has never been determined by fate. Thus, I won't give up," Neji declared. Tenten chuckled softly and grinned, saying, "Neji, you have to give up. Your fighting style is nearly ineffective against me. You are practically without arms, so even if you opened your eyes, it would be too late to do anything more than lightly." Neji snarled, knowing that this would not be an easy defeat. As he charged forward, he was about to kill Tenten with a single blow when all of a sudden his feet gave way and he fell. He felt a very sharp blade against his neck as he hit the ground. In an instant, he realized that Tenten Tail was the one who had captured him. He sighed as he heard Ibiki declare the match in Tenten's favor, realizing that he would have perished if she had not decided to stop the blade on her tail. Tenten smirked a little as she turned to leave. Even though she didn't hate Neji, she had long believed that after he predicted who would win a fight, his fate should be proven to be incorrect. The board spun again as she approached her team. It came to an end when Neji was taken off the field by the medics to have his cuts and arms examined and healed. Shino versus Shikamaru. With hardly a quick glance at the board, Shikamaru called out, "I forfeit." "Okay." Shino advances. Ibiki simply nodded. As Shikamaru looked down at his sensei, Asuma, the board whirled back into action. Asuma questioned in astonishment, "Why did you not go down there and fight him?" "Because, despite being similar, his fighting style can totally counteract mine. Additionally, not one of my current competitors, let alone any of the other competitors who have advanced past Kiba, could handle him. I would have a decent chance of facing off against a competitor who could easily defeat me in the finals if I were to fight and win, which I could if I so desired," Shikamaru remarked idly. "That may be true, but if you had gone on, your mom would have gotten off your back about taking your ninja life with such a laid-back outlook," Asuma replied. "Yes, but with this lineup of competitors, I would rather take my chances with this lineup than face my mom right now," Shikamaru stated, closing his eyes. Once more, the board halted, revealing the identities of the upcoming competitors. Lee versus Zaku. Lee and Zaku leapt from the balcony and landed on the ground light. They instantly moved and took positions across from one another. Zaku called over to Lee as the signal was given, saying, "You have to give up or else you will lose. This will not transpire as it did in the forest. You should back down, you only have one arm and I only used a little of the skill I have in the forest before your friend got me with that attack," Lee stated as he prepared to move. Gazing at his arm in a sling, Zaku grinned. It was slightly injured during their attack on Sasuke from Neji and Lee's group, but not severely enough to require a sling. With an even bigger smirk, Zaku pulled his arm from the sling, pointed his palm, which had a tube running up it for just you, at Lee, and let out a burst of air. However, it only left a tiny indentation after smashing into the wall. Lee was attempting to kick Zaku in the head, but Zaku moved his head up his arm to block. This did not work, though, as the force broke his arm and sent him flying through the air and into a wall while spinning in circles. Unfortunately, the force of the rotation caused his head to collide with the wall, breaking his neck and breaking his skull, killing him. Ibiki had no choice but to shake his head because, when your opponent moves as quickly as Lee, you are unable to block, duck, or dodge his kicks. Then, while some people arrived and took the now dead sound ninja's body out of the room, Ibiki called the match. There were differing reactions throughout the room, making the general public who had not yet experienced death feel a little queasy. This came to an end when the board sounded to announce that the next contestant was up, while others were shaking their heads at the dumb move. Dosu versus Shuai. Shaking his head, Shuai turned to face his rival. He had overheard his teammate and sensei discussing the finals and his chances of winning, which implied that his own chances of winning were not much higher either. Many people were unaware of Kwaiji's intelligence. While he may not have been the best in the group, he was aware of when he was being outmatched. Furthermore, he was aware that Shikamaru had greater skills than he did, so if Shikamaru did not think it would be wise for him to try for a spot this time either, he should not try. He then stood up and said, "Sir, I would like to forfeit as well." Asuma shook his head at this, knowing full well that it was now too late for his bribe to have any effect. Considering that Ibiki declared Dosu the victor mere seconds later. However, he then told himself that his genin team was safe for the upcoming few months, when the chunin exams would take place, and that this genin group was hopefully much safer than the previous one. The winners were then summoned to the main floor by Ibiki, where they alternated LY took a paper out of a tiny cup. When they opened the paper, they saw a number written on it. Then Ibiki requested their phone numbers. Glancing at hers, Naruto said, 2. Next, Gaara said, 4. Then Lee said, 3, sir. With a quick glance, Haku chuckled and said, 7. Upon glancing at her, Tenten said, 5. 1. Kiba smirked as she turned to face Naruto. Next, looking bored, Conquero said, 6. Then Dosu said, 8. All right, those numbers will determine your matches, Ibiki nodded. Tenten vs. Conquero, Lee vs. Gaara, Haku vs. Dosu, and Naruto vs. Kiba will be the matches. You will all have a month to prepare while we get ready for the final exam section. During that time, you will each have the opportunity to showcase your abilities and hope for a promotion. Keep in mind that every match you play matters because you can still advance even if you lose the first one. In order for everyone to safely return to the village, kindly rejoin your team now. All of them nodded as they split off into their own groups, each guided by a chunin to an underground passage that would allow them to safely exit the forest. Many of them wondered what lay ahead for them in the coming months as they were leaving. Sitting in silence, Naruto, Haku, and Tenten heard the Hokage discuss how they fared in the initial rounds of the chunin exams. Naruto had been his introduction. Well, Naruto, you need to work on your performance in the second section of the exam. First of all, even though you're usually more of a defensive fighter, you rushed in. Second, you almost lost control of the fight when he managed to counterattack, throwing you off balance. However, you were able to regain control once you found a solid footing. Then you removed his curse seal in addition to defeating him in what would have only required 2 moves. Overall, you did well, but you still need a lot of work, the Hokage remarked as he gave Naruto a close examination. Naruto nodded and said, yes, sir, I noticed. All right. Now, Haku, you performed admirably in light of your rival and, similar to Naruto, you did not divulge too much about your background or abilities. For all this time, I could not find many flaws in your skill. To put it mildly, I think you did fantastic, the Hokage remarked, giving Haku a joyful smile. Haku said, thank you, Hokage. Sama. And finally, Tenten, since your usual style was unsuitable for the opponent you were up against, you got off to a little rough start overall. However, you fixed this after realizing what was wrong. Overall, you performed admirably, the Hokage grinned. I'm grateful, sir, Tenten said. Well, now I believe that finishes the second part of the chunin exams. Any ideas what we should work on? Seated behind his desk, staring at the 3 genin in the room, the Hokage asked. Well, Hokage. Sama, after reflecting on our battles, we've come to the conclusion that our fighting technique needs improvement. We believe it needs to be more rounded because it is too focused. The 2 primary Charka styles ought to be combined. Utilizing swift dodges in conjunction with swift counterattacks are potent one. Shot blows, along with applying pressure point strikes in our poison Charka, results in a strong overall style. Can be employed fast, making a protracted conflict with any of us extremely risky. Said Haku. That's a good idea, but I don't think this group of chunin hopefuls will benefit much from simply making improvements to your taijutsu. Along with that, we should continue honing your skills with genjutsu and the few ninjutsu you will be using, making sure you fully understand the ones you require. Once these are finished, you will have learned the majority of what you will ever need to know, the Hokage remarked. Tenten, Haku, and Naruto nodded. They were going to be true ninjas, which was why they were learning on a few chosen justice. Not like the snobs that so many ninjas had turned into these days. They continued to train with small battle fans, which served as the basis for all of the ninjutsu they used. The only significant advantage they had was that in a mass area, individuals had to clear out groups if they were discovered to be significantly outnumbered. However, these substantial ones were predicated on their prior abilities prior to their integration into the new family. Tenten, an abundance of weaponry, Haku and her ice mirrors, and more clones than you would ever want to deal with for Naruto. Regarding the genjutsu, their entire design revolved around stealth. This encompassed anything from staying silent to evading people's eyes or notices. Good, so you understand what you need to work on then? The Hokage inquired. Yes, sir, we shall start by working on the various general and nin justice. After finishing our taijutsu, if we have time, we will continue working on it. Otherwise, we will work on something else. As Haku and Naruto nodded in agreement, Tenten spoke. Good, normally I would have Anko tell you this, but as you know, her current mission is semi-important, said the Hokage. Posting her to guard Sasuke I think is overkill, but we will see. I hope sis will be back with us soon, Naruto uttered. Within a day or two, she will. The Hokage remarked, I thought she would make a better guard than most of our new Anbu recruits. Yes, she did tell us. So, may we begin our training right away? Naruto inquired. Yes, of course, the Hokage grinned a little. I'm grateful, Naruto said. Veronica entered the room with a slight frown on her face, and Haku, Tenten, and Naruto turned to leave, only to head for the doors leading to the Hokage's office. Sir, may I speak with all four of you for a little bit? Veronica inquired while scanning the space, presenting Naruto with the idea that she had arrived knowing they would all be present. The Hokage responded, sure, I don't have anything to really do at the moment, and Team 7 gave him a small nod in agreement. I'm grateful. The twins I previously discussed with you are coming this way, which is why I feel the need to talk to you. Veronica expressed a frown. Normally I would say that is good, but what about this that you don't like? The Hokage inquired. The mere fact that they are traveling to this location. You have to realize that they only go where chaos is expected to arise because they can't sense my own charka. Implying that there will soon be some kind of pandemonium here, stated Veronica. Can you explain how you know this and why it cannot be them just sensing you? Haku inquired. They were always running around to different places, so I put a tracking seal on them a long time ago. When I had to stay behind somewhere, it was difficult to find them again. Therefore, I was able to catch up to them by using this seal or mark. I was unable to genuinely use the marks to track them until after the exam. It appears from observing their current development that they are currently moving in this general direction. If the ninja who showed up at your exam is any indication, this is most likely our current location, Veronica stated, elucidating the initial section. Okay, and why do you not think it is them sensing you? Replied Naruto. To put it simply, even if they gained the skill to sensing charka, since I last saw them it would be useless since they would not be able to tell if it was my charka or someone else's charka. Veronica said, give more details. Let me get this straight. Something is about to happen here, so the two people you are looking for are heading in this direction. Is your guess a minor conflict? Glancing slightly older at this news, the Hokage inquired. Veronica responded, in short, yes, and the twins would join in the fighting on either side unless I can meet them first, which caused the Hokage to sigh. I am really getting too old for this, but why come to me, why not just go out and meet them to stop this beforehand? The Hokage merely inquired, sensing he would not approve of the response, since they might still believe that I'm dead. Although it takes a lot more to truly kill our kind, demons can be killed. Thus, there might be conflict if I were to confront them somewhere other than here, with them believing that I was a fraud. My hope is that if I stay here when they show, I might have a better opportunity to demonstrate my true identity without having to fight. Veronica remarked, appearing a little uncomfortable. Somehow I am thinking you just don't want to fight them at all, Naruto replied. Yes, I don't, damn it. Recall that despite their human-like appearance, they are still demons and twins. In a practice fight, I can take care of one of them with ease, but when we get together, they're a nightmare. In addition, I'm not sure how skilled they are at this point, so they might have easily caught up to or even exceeded me. You already know my other motivations, in addition to that. Veronica mentioned that the last part of her speech sounded softer. So what is it you need then? The Hokage questioned if Veronica and the twins could fight and do more damage than Kyuubi. He asked in jest. A place to stay until they get here, so I can meet them when they get here without looking too much like an imposter, said Veronica. Tenten said, you can stay with us if you want, without much delay. When Naruto and Haku saw how she was thinking, they couldn't help but chuckle a little. Thank you, I think I will take up that offer kindly. Veronica grinned as she noticed Haku and Naruto laughing. Naruto said, welcome, noticing that Tenten appeared on the verge of passing out from possibly seeing those swords up close now. Veronica, I have to know why someone would pose as you in order to get near the twins. The Hokage questioned, a little surprised. In other words, they are not entirely demon, much like Naruto's team. They are so despised by the public. This means that trying to look like me is the only way to approach them safely without getting attacked or closely observed. Veronica stated, but it was clear that she was only providing a portion of the explanation. That clarifies a lot. You are welcome to remain with Naruto's team, but I do ask that you pay us in some way because having you here carries a sizable risk for us, said the Hokage. I already owe Naruto and her friends for saving me from the seal, as you may wish. If the twins decide to stay here after I meet them, I could train them for the next few months if that's what you'd like, Veronica said. Tenten and Naruto leapt to join as soon as they heard that Veronica would be providing training. Even though Haku controlled her own happiness more, she could not help but smile at her teammates' happiness. Sounds like an idea. Teach them what you want, just keep small if you can, the Hokage nodded and laughed a little. When the third exam is administered, I would much rather see this village still intact. Naruto knew the remark was directed at her, so she couldn't help but blush. Considering that her pranks, at the very least, were of S-rank ninja ability. It was a sure thing to invite trouble when you gave her too many of the ideal pranking abilities. With an uncontrollable smile, Veronica said, "Don't worry about the kids. They will behave themselves and not misuse anything I am teaching them. Good, they also have their own training they need to work on, they can inform you of, so you can work out when everything would best be taught and what order," said the Hokage. Okay, if that is all, I will get going. I am in need of some more clothes, stated Veronica. Yes, Naruto, you and your team can help Veronica with that, I am sure. Haku laughed and said, "Yes, Hokage sir," as Naruto whimpered. She had always disliked going shopping for clothes as a guy, which is why she would always wear the orange jumpsuit. It was worse for her as a girl, though, because she had to buy new clothes every time her body changed sizes. For herself and her sisters, a complete female costume had just been made. She would also need a new set before the end of the year, the way things were looking for her. After that, Veronica and Naruto's group headed for the village's clothing district. The Hokage said, "Alert all Leaf Ninja of this news and have them return to the village at once, after they had left hearing range. If there is a war, I will not allow this village to fall." His words were met with silence, but he could tell the Anbu stationed in the room had left. Much to Naruto's relief, the clothes shopping was completed, and once everything was delivered to the team's 7 house, they soon discovered that they were in a training area that was laid out like a field. It was essentially just a meadow, though there was a small lake and some trees close by. Veronica halted and turned to face them as they approached the area's center. Veronica stated plainly, "Okay, now tell me what you need to work on during this month. In order to improve the fit of our taijutsu, we must first work on mastering the few ninjutsu and genjutsu that we have learned. Following that, we're going to focus on honing our stealth and speed ninja skills," Haku stated. Not bad, and what are the jutsu you will be working on? Veronica inquired. The Infinite Darkness jutsu and the Soundless World jutsu are the genjutsu, followed by the Hidden Mist jutsu and the Gun jutsu for fire, earth, water, and air. After that, I'll be working on my weapon justice, Haku on her ice style, and Naruto on her clone style justice. Tenten said, "Explain again, this time." "Oh, and the replacement jutsu. I see, can you show me these jutsu?" Veronica inquired once more, still unaware of the variety of jutsu. Naruto asked, "Who do you want to start?" "You can if you want." With a nod, Naruto performed her unique jutsu. Explosive clones, then her shadow clone. Causing them to form first, then using the blast to destroy a tree. Subsequently, she performed her jutsu transformation, adopting Sakura's form, though the tail still remained for a long time. After that, she performed Infinite Darkness jutsu, which temporarily caused Veronica to lose all senses before it was lifted, and Hidden Mist jutsu, which covered the area in a thick layer of mist. Finally, Naruto employed the Gun jutsu to form the designated elements. Every time she used them, an elemental ball the size of a marble formed and shot off quickly in the direction she pointed her hand. That is all the jutsu, and the jutsu I am good with, Naruto grinned as she assessed the damage she had inflicted upon the tree that had been her intended target. All are very useful, and though some of them are flashy, Haku, could you just tell me about what you can do with your jutsu? Veronica uttered after a short while. Yes, but in all honesty, I only own 2 genuine ice justice. Using the first, I attack an enemy up close by forming ice needles. On the other hand, I create ice mirrors around my adversary and myself, which I can use to enter and exit at great speeds. I can now attack them with throwing weapons without running the same risk of getting hit. Even so, I still find it difficult to use the amount of charka required to maintain this just you if I need it for an extended length of time. After a short while, Veronica nodded and said, I see something interesting, and Tenten, I'm going to guess your weapon. Is it possible to summon weapons from scrolls and use them to attack your opponent by throwing them or manipulating them with wires? Yes, though how did you guess? Tenten inquired. It's an old concept that I've seen before, Veronica remarked, grinning a little. Veronica, may I inquire about the just you that I utilized, which were ostentatious? A bewildered Naruto asked. The infinite darkness and hidden mist justu. They both affect a wide area, meaning unless you are facing a group or one enemy that knows you are heading towards them, Veronica continued, and I noticed you did not do the soundless world justu. That makes sense. Regarding the soundless world justu, I chose not to participate because it has an effect on the user alone, turning them into a sound magnet. Almost any sound produced within 5 feet of the user is silenced, allowing the user to move around quietly in practically any setting. Justu was Zabuza's second favorite device, so Haku said with a sorrowful smile that it was for that exact reason. Interesting, I see. Veronica said, I'm going to test you right now, so your job is to land a solid hit on me. She then removed all but one of her swords and placed them against a tree. Why? Tenten questioned in astonishment as she and her group assumed their standard positions. With an almost predatory smile, Veronica said, just to see how good you are, and if I need to beat the flashily ninja out of you. Haku said, okay, but she couldn't help but sense that Tenten, Naruto, and her were going to suffer from this. Tenten and Naruto both concurred over the link. As she shifted into a more casual stance, Veronica said, you may make the first move. With one hand poised to draw the sword, the other lay lightly on the hilt. She didn't have to wait long for a small wave of senbon, kunai, and throwing stars to fly in her direction. She took out her swords and batted them all away without even thinking. The final kunai was then allowed to fly past her and explode in a tree behind her as she sidestepped the explosive tags attached to it. She didn't even turn to see this. Instead, she focused on the teams as they separated and attacked her from different angles, each using a unique taijutsu technique. She skillfully avoided every blow and deflected the few that she was unable to avoid without risk. Their flawless coordination was evident in how well timed each of their strikes was, leaving her quite impressed. However, she increased the pace of the fight gradually and quickly discovered the point at which they were more defensive than offensive. Impressed, Veronica pushed them even harder, causing them to eventually slip and reach high Jonin speeds, almost mid-Anbu speeds. She struck each person hard with her palm, sending them sprawling to the ground. After a short while, they managed to take advantage of the momentum and land, though not as firmly as they would have preferred. They were panting heavily from the exertion of keeping up that pace, and their continued survival was solely due to their mental connection. However, they moved on from this and began studying hand signals that formed various gun justu styles. With a sly smile, Veronica skillfully avoided every shot. Then, as she dodged the next 3 shots, the infinite darkness justu suddenly took effect, and she lost all sense of reality. She leapt quickly backward and then sideways, knowing that most ninja would lose at this point, but she was not going to give Team 7 an easy ride. As she moved toward the only team member who wasn't shooting at her, she began anticipating the trajectory of each shot and dodging them with her keen sense of charka. The other 2 moved swiftly, one making clones, the other making what Veronica Charka thought was a whip. The whip struck at her, forcing her to leap backwards. She then leapt to her feet, drawing her swords into a chain wipe that passed through each clone and flew in the direction of her final teammate. However, a fellow teammate leapt to the occasion, seizing the chain and bursting upon sensing it was going off course. However, since the teammate was compelled to release the justu holding Veronica, the damage had already been done. As far as Tenten could tell, Veronica was playing with them, so she was shocked by the fight. Not only had she defeated them in a traditional taijutsu match, but she had also vanquished their strongest genjutsu. Tenten pulled from her own seal's fan blades as she realized Veronica was now wielding her own weapon. Veronica used her own swords to destroy Haku's after seeing him draw hers and unleash a barrage of razor sharp wind blades at her. Veronica did not dodge the blows as they had intended. 6 Narutos suddenly materialized around Veronica, so that was all the window of opportunity they needed. Without giving it a second thought, Veronica quickly took out all 6 of them, but rather than dissipating into a plume of smoke as she usually did, they burst into explosions the size of large bombs. As Tenten looked where the explosion occurred and waited for the smoke to clear, Naruto landed next to her. She noticed that Tenten and Haku were breathing a little more forcefully than usual due to the intensity of the battle. "Do you think we got her?" she asked, glancing over at Tenten. Tenten said, "I'm not sure, but I feel like something is wrong with her," before realizing what she had just said. "Move." The whip Veronica had been using flashed right past each of their positions, and they all ducked out of the way as one. When they finally looked up, they saw Veronica smirking at them as she hit the ground once more. She appeared to have leapt clear of the path to evade the blow. She could not help but be impressed by each of them. "It's a good idea, but unfortunately ineffective, and as it stands, I believe I've seen everything I needed to." As the sword reverted to its original form and allowed Veronica to sheath the blade, she uttered, "You may call this fight a draw." "Thanks, but why stop?" "In case it was a trap," Naruto said, panting slightly as she slowly moved out of her stance. "Because I've used my speed, which is much faster than that of a normal human, twice now to end parts of fights. The first was the blows to the palm, and the second was to get your clones out of the blast just now." Veronica said, "That's also I have all of your just do overall, and Haku, may I ask what you were using before I looked like a whip to me?" "Well, it is my bloodline," Haku remarked plainly. "Making whips?" Veronica expressed confusion. "The majority of my family members could control the water with hand movements. There was no need for control. Although it was said that members of my family could use large-scale water justu without even using hand signs, I have not even come close to mastering it." Haku said, forming the water whip using the nearby lake once more, adding, "Some of the most powerful were even said to be able to rival the second Hokage of this village who became known for his mastery over water justu." "Interesting," Veronica remarked after observing the water that Haku was manipulating for a short while. "Now what?" Haku inquired. "I am going to think for a little bit on what to train you in overall," said Veronica. "So what do we do till then?" Tenten inquired. "Perform the justu as you have intended to. I'll return with our training schedule in about an hour." After saying that, Veronica disappeared from the field. Tenten saw that her other weaponry had vanished too. With a nod, Naruto turned to face the others and they started rehearsing for what was to come in the upcoming weeks. The Chuunin exam day was an event to behold. The Leaf Village appeared immaculate in picture. Perfect, with every store open. It was a picture. Perfect day with crystal clear skies and an air full of excitement. However, if you knew where to look, you could discover that this wasn't entirely accurate. Since the twins were now somewhere in the city, Veronica had been nervous the entire day. However, they sensed that someone was following them, so they disguised their charka and blocked their seal signal. And now that Veronica was attempting to find them the old-fashioned way, it was progressing slowly because they would reappear as soon as Veronica discovered a lead. Additionally, ninja could be seen all over the village. Until one realized that all of these ninja were Chunin rank or above, nothing about this was really different. Even the typically elusive Anbu were spotted moving through the village. The village was on high alert, prepared for anything that might happen, thanks to Veronica's warning. Even an invasion, though everyone hoped that would not happen at all. Everyone in the stands could feel the suspense and excitement rising. There was a lot of talk in the village about the teams, especially the current Squad 7. 2 of the Cage's current offspring were also present. Last but not least, a clan heir followed by a person from a new village who was unique, and finally one of the Leafs for the majority of Taijustu users. All things considered, the upcoming matches appeared to be fantastic. Within the arena, the competitors were silent, as they were all apprehensive about what lay ahead. Naruto because, despite her confidence in her ability to defeat Kiba and his dog, she knew that defeating Gaara or Lee in the next maximum match would be difficult, even if they both suffered severe losses. Tenten's only concern was that she might have to confront Haku in a future conflict. It was nearly hard for them to fight, let alone Naruto, because of their bond, which only grew stronger months after the transformation. Just when everyone was at their most tense, a Jonin entered the arena. He nodded, looking out toward the throng before turning back to face the genin. Before speaking, he reviewed each one of them and said, "These matches have very straightforward rules. You must give up the match if I tell you to stop. There are no real rules aside from that. Thus, Naruto and Kiba, kindly stay here, while the others head up to the contestants' box," he said, receiving a nod as the others entered the area and the Hokage got up to start speaking. They didn't have to wait long to receive the order to begin. As Naruto took her place facing Kiba, who appeared quite arrogant with his puppy Akamaru, she grinned a little. Naruto called over as the all-clear to start fighting was given. "I guess Kiba still believes that I'm just a helpless female genin that you can easily outmaneuver? Or do you feel concerned?" Kiba lunged forward to punch Naruto, saying, "Please, I can beat you any day I want," but Naruto moved slightly to avoid the blow. Naruto delivered 3 quick blows to his arm and side before kicking him out of the way. "Well, you were slow, much too slow if you want to hit me like that," she said. Kiba felt like his muscles were on fire as he stood up and grunted as he landed, holding his side a little. With her cloak still covering her body, Naruto grinned and said, "Got to like my acid like Charka." "Well, it won't let you win against me," Kiba remarked as he and Akamaru charged Naruto once more. But Naruto had become much more adept at evading the blows. She maneuvered between the attacks, but it was difficult for her to follow the little puppy. Naruto noticed a wide gap as Akamaru leapt backward, though, without Kiba serving as his additional guard. As she landed, she sidestepped the dog's lunge and struck it close to the chest, sending it to the ground in a whining heap. Kiba gasped and growled, saying, "You dare hurt Akamaru?" "I will do what I must to make sure I do not lose this fight," Naruto replied. "Ninja are not honorable after all." After taking a pill, Kiba said, "Okay, then you shall pay." Immediately, Naruto grew tense, but she quickly adopted a lighter stance than her previous one. Compared to the other stances that Naruto's team had worn, this one was far more balanced for both attack and defense. Kiba changed forward more quickly than before, so he did not have to wait long. Naruto quickly adapted to Kiba's increased speed, but unlike before, she still had to genuinely deflect some of his blows. But as it was, she was unable to locate a real gap that she could exploit. His attacks came in random clawing swings that made blocking impossible. Suddenly, a punch slipped through and struck Naruto hard, sending her reeling backward and gasping for air. As Kiba continued to attack, Naruto vanished in a cloud of smoke. Kiba did not give up. And a sizable stone appeared. At this point, Kiba was unable to thwart the attack and kicked it forcefully. He then collapsed, clutching his leg where the stone had struck, gasping in agony. With a hand on her side, Naruto approached her slowly as he appeared near the tree. "Kiba, you have a nice punch." Naruto walked over and said, "I will give you that, but unfortunately for you, it is over." Kiba rose to his feet, despite the obvious pain from the stone blow, which appeared to have fractured his leg. A few feet away from Kiba, Naruto halted and asked, "So, Kiba, do you give up?" "Never." Kiba cried out, "Akamaru, get him." Naruto replaced herself once more with the stone, not even turning to see if the dog was there. To her astonishment and delight, however, Akamaru remained in the same spot where she had knocked him down. Kiba sighed as he collapsed once more. He had thought Naruto would turn around so he could take her out from behind. Though it wasn't the best plan, it was his best opportunity to win and finish quickly. Kiba responded, "Yes. I give," which prompted the judge and the medic to show up on the field. Naruto announced Kiba as the winner. However, before Kiba and Akamaru were sent to a medical facility for Kiba's injuries, Naruto offered one last jab. "Well, Kiba, now that you and Sasuke have both lost to the same girl, guess we are the stronger of the sexes." Soon after, Lee and Gaara were placed opposite each other on the battlefield. Lee moved quickly when the signal to start was given, trying to land several hits in a short period of time. However, sand emerged from the Gaara gourd, thwarting every attack. Lee kept going, testing the sand with increasing speed, until at last his fist slipped through and struck Gaara hard in the side. However, Lee had to quickly retreat as the sand moved to engulf his hand and arm. As he did so, he kept a close eye on Gaara, who had been knocked down by the punch and was now standing. Gaara shook his head and touched the area where his head had been struck. His voice sounded as dead as a grave, but he looked at Lee and said, "You are a truly worthy fighter. I'll take pleasure in murdering you and watching your blood run." I might be a worthy fighter, but I cannot let you kill me. Lee gave Gaara a strange look at that. The only thing Gaara could do in response to this was launch a wall of sand in Lee's direction, who dodges it out of the way with even more speed. Gaara then keeps attacking Lee, sending more waves and sand tentacles in her direction. However, the green-clad ninja remained completely unaffected by the sand attacks, preventing any of them from getting to him. With a small smirk on his face, Lee realized that instead of just one taijutsu as usual during his training month, his sensei had worked with him. But under Charka's authority. Most people were unaware of this, but he was unable to use jutsu at all due to the limitations of his Charka network. His sensei had taught him how to channel Charka into his fist and feet to increase the force of his kicks and punches, but cautioned him that this was not an excuse to train any less. He could use Charka in other ways. With just a nod, Lee was able to demolish the training period with a single blow after learning how to release Charka through his fist at the moment of impact. He knew it would help him enough to hopefully win the fight, even though he was unsure of how well it would work. Keeping this in mind, he charged in once more, swerving around the tentacles and sand waves or, when they got close enough, destroying them with a strong punch. He then started attacking Gaara's defenses once more, dealing him a few more blows. However, just as previously, the sand nearer Gaara reacted swiftly, forcing him to back off once more. However, he was now aware of how quickly Gaara's sand moved, and he intended to complete this task in a single motion if possible. He then backflipped to reach the arena's entrance while dodging a few more sand waves, and he then ascended a short distance to avoid more sand strands. Then, he undid the weights that were fastened to his leg warmer. Normally, he would never do this, but his sensei had once again assured him that it would be acceptable in order to prevent Gaara. Lee dropped the weights and said, "Now, my friend, we shall see how well you fare against me when I can move freely." Conquero leaned forward in the contestant stand and asked, "Will losing a few pounds really make a difference?" Naruto then said, "Now but dropping a couple hundred would." At this moment, the weights made a significant indentation in the ground where they had impacted, resulting in the formation of large dust clouds. Even the Hokage and Kazekage were staring in disbelief as much of the crowd did. With a strange expression, the Hokage turned to face the Kazekage and said, "I thought I trained hard back in my youth." Nodding, the Kazekage said, "I agree." Lee appeared to vanish from view down in the arena. Nobody knew where he had gone. Gaara was a little concerned because no one had ever moved with this much speed or been able to land 6 blows on him. Sensing his sand screen move, he reacted, but his sand was too late to stop the punch that broke through and launched Gaara skyward. More sand was released by the Gaara gourd to aid in his safe landing, but it was unable to withstand the subsequent punch. Right now, Lee's speed was simply too much for him to handle. Gaara snarled as the sand inside his gourd gradually disappeared, leaving only his own hand's worth of sand to protect him from further blows. He was determined not to let this person win over him or allow such a child to take his life. He summoned all of his sand to form a large round ball by drawing his strength and Charka to him. However, even as it completely solidified, the sand quivered due to the force of the blow Lee delivered. Gaara realized that changing into his half-demon state would take too long, so he needed to come up with a plan quickly. When the sand surrounding him began to shake from yet another blow and a small amount of light appeared, Gaara realized he was going to lose. Both the sand ninja and the Kazekage, who were watching the match, were staring in disbelief. They had seldom witnessed a single person exhibit such potent power. However, Gaara's sand prevented power from ever winning against him, which is why he had never been defeated before. However, this leaf genin, who was rumored to be a dead last and incapable of using jutsu, was going to completely destroy and vanquish Gaara. And evidence of this was the huge sandball that shielded and concealed Gaara. It broke apart under the force of the blows that were directed at it. Gaara looked up in the arena as sand fragments flew past him and his sand shells broke apart. With all the strength he possessed, Gaara leapt backward and dodged backward, trying to call his sand rapidly back towards him, transforming into kunai. However, this desperate attempt failed, as Lee cried out, "Leaf Hurricane." With his newly acquired Charka skills, Lee performed a two-part spinning kick grab and pulled air around himself to create a powerful enough shield to stop the closest sand kunai, who was still developing his power. He carried on into the second, sending Gaara hurtling farther away. Then he dodged more sand kunai and chased after Gaara, who vanished from view once more. When he reappeared, he extended his leg and whirled around, lining Gaara's clothes with his clothes before driving him hard enough into the earth to leave a small crater. Even as he sent Gaara flying into the earth, the sand kunai that remained whole pursued him, making him leap away and keep dodging until he was back up against the arena wall. The fighting then slowed down once more. Gaara rose slowly, battered and bruised, and if one looked closely enough, one could see he was barely able to stand. However, Lee appeared more than prepared to carry on with the fight, even though he appeared a little worn out from it. As things were, Lee and Gaara were both a little low on charka. Gaara was forced to use his sand armor to cushion the blows, and Lee was able to add charka to most of his blows to counteract the sand attacks. From his position on the arena wall, Lee then noticed that the sand was approaching Gaara much more slowly. He pondered whether this was a trap or if Gaara was simply on the verge of leaving charka. This didn't matter in the end, though, because he knew he had to prevent Gaara from completely regaining control of his sand or else he would run the risk of losing this match. As he advanced toward his last attack, Lee began to have a faint tunnel vision. Gaara expresses gratitude for his diminishing charka, which prevented him from reacting normally. He did his best to avert the impending attack. With the remaining charka, he attempted to create a sand curtain and solidify the fragments. However, just as before, he moved so slowly that he was struck in the chest squarely and propelled through the wall of forming sand, leaving behind a cutout that resembled his body. After being propelled skyward by the blow, he tumbled to the ground and remained there for a short while before stopping in front of a tree. The force of the blow and the awkward landing made it difficult for him to stay conscious, and as he slowly rolled over to get back, he froze and saw a fist by his face. With his fist just inches away from Gaara, Lee was positioned above him, and even though the sand was not moving to strike Lee, Gaara knew he would die if Lee did not block this blow. The moment the Chunin materialized, Gaara flinched back and said, "Lee has the match. Lee prevails in the battle, thus no more fighting is necessary." The audience cheered the fight immediately and then began to converse. At this, the sand ninja could only whisper to one another in disbelief. When Lee gathered his weight and began to carry them around with frightening ease, he slowly walked off the field. Gaara, on the other hand, just sat there on the field for a while, feeling frustrated and angry that he had lost the fight in addition to being extremely confused about what had just happened. However, Gaara did not feel the usual disappointment or rage as he looked up to where his father, the case, was seated. Gaara was taken aback by his father's blank expression, which he had never seen on his face before. He vanished from the field in a tiny cloud of sand, needing time to gather his thoughts before taking any further action. Conquero then descended to the field, followed by Tenten, who, like Naruto, was still completely covered in a robe. They stood waiting to start on the field, and she smiled as Conquero looked at her. The Chunin gave them a long look, nodded, and said, "Begin," before vanishing. Gazing at Conquero, Tenten yawned, waiting for him to initiate contact. She was aware that she could easily defeat him if he didn't use his deadly blows, even though she didn't know all the skills he possessed at the moment. To be honest, if her predictions about his fighting style were right, she expected this to be a fairly dull match. However, as his puppet materialized and he did make the initial move, Conquero did not appear bored but rather extremely focused. Subsequently, Conquero dispatched his puppet in Tenten's direction while swiftly withdrawing from the center field. Tenten regarded the puppet with a degree of caution now, then grinned as the arm parted to reveal a hollow tube from which a purple ball was shooting in her direction. She jumped away, the ball exploding into a cloud of purple dust, and her smirk got bigger. Her body ensured that she didn't have to worry about poisoning. She immediately began to run toward Conquero, who had moved to the opposite side of the field, as soon as she touched down. Tenten heard the puppet rattle as she passed by it, so she leapt to the side to avoid some senbon and kunai that were about to fly out of it. Her smile was slowly dissipating as she became aware that Conquero was preventing her from getting close to the kunai by keeping her at a distance. And while she could probably destroy the puppet, it was getting harder to find an exposed spot where she could inflict enough damage on it without risking her own injuries. She swiftly leapt backward, dodging and snarling as the puppet managed to track her closely. She grinned, though, as she walked past a rock that Naruto had used with her trick substitute Justu. If she couldn't defeat the puppet, she would make it bring about its own demise. Thus, she moved the puppet further away, waited until it was in a good location, and then replaced her with the stone. The puppet had drawn a blade to attack her, and as it went through the rock, the blade sliced through it completely, splitting it in two. When Tenten considers what might have happened if she had been struck by the blade before running after Conquero only to discover that he had disappeared from view, she nearly grimaces. Tenten growled, realizing she had become overconfident, believing this fight would be easy for her to win. Then, Tenten heard Conquero say, "Well, it seems you overthought your skills," as she heard a noise behind her indicate that the puppet was about to attack her once more. "But I'll never lose a long range conflict," Tenten said, pulling out a set of battle fans with blades from her clothing that resembled the ones Haku had used. "Well boy, you have a lot to learn then if you think that," she said. "Is it really possible for your battle fans to stop my puppet?" Tenten began to dodge more and more as the puppet's attacks accelerated. "Remember, it cannot be poisoned, and even if you cut it up, I can still use any of the pieces to attack you," Conquero uttered. "Yes, this is true, but whoever claimed that I needed poison to prevail?" Tenten said, "I can just attack you to win," and then he disappeared. Conquero moved from his hiding place to another location in the trees bordering the field, not about to wait and see if it was a bluff. However, he was unaware that this was her desired action from him. Because moving your fingers was simple to conceal, moving your entire body was more difficult. Unless you were a puppet master, that is. Tenten quickly identified him as such. Tenten pulled out a large scroll and ran towards him, saying, "Now Conquero, I will show you my true skills." Conquero stood with a kunai pressed firmly against his neck and could not help but sigh with frustration. When she had taken out the scroll, Tenten's entire fighting style had altered. However, she had defeated him in a full-on long-range weapons duel, something he had not believed was possible. For the first few moments, Tenten had kept him so far from the enemy that he was unable to move his puppet, much less use it in combat. Subsequently, after managing to secure a gap and evading the barrage of kunai and throwing stars, Conquero endeavored to regain the advantage in the match. He quickly attached his charka strings to his puppet, only to discover that Tenten's kunai had sliced them as he pulled the strings to make it move. He didn't give up and attempted to control his puppet a few more times by sending his strings in different directions before connecting. However, just like the first time, they were sliced before he could utilize his puppet in any way. On his fifth attempt, after attempting an alternative strategy, he understood what was going on. He noticed that the charka strings seemed to bounce off before dissipating when he attempted to use them as a weapon against her. This is when he realized that Tenten was adding a layer of her acid nature charka to her weapons. Now that his primary ability as a puppet user was essentially useless, he was in a difficult situation with Lil to cling to. Tenten was simply biding her time while preparing to attack and end this match because she already knew that Conquero had run out of options. She was aware that if she gave Conquero too much time, he might figure out a way out of his difficult situation. She then moved after seeing Conquero trip over a rock. In an instant, she narrowed the gap and vanished from sight. When he turned to face where she would have gone, a kunai was placed against his neck and his arm was pinched. At this, the Jonin made a reappearance and declared the match in Tenten's favor. Before long, Dosu and Haku were standing in the middle of the field, prepared to battle. Neither felt that this battle would end well. Like Haku, Dosu had only a rudimentary understanding of the skills the other actually possessed based on their teammates. Dosu, however, had a small advantage because he had witnessed Haku fight and had seen some of her abilities. The only thing that either of them was genuinely certain of was that Haku could use wind charka and had acid similar to charka. Dosu's only known ability was probably the use of sound. However, these thoughts were quiet in their minds as Haku took the initiative and gave the all clear to start. She hurriedly sent 6 senbon in his direction. "Really, as that is how you are going to start this?" Dosu smirked, though. "Raise his right arm," he said. After the senbon struck it, it bounced off without causing any damage, or until Haku gasped and almost fell while holding her ears. It required several moments for her to get back on her feet. Haku turned to face Dosu, who was grinning even more at this. Then she shook her head and sighed. "You are going to pay for that one sound, boy." "Really I am?" With a sly grin, Dosu asked, removing the cloth covering his right arm to reveal a metal gauntlet around his forearm. Then, with a slight flick of his left hand, Haku heard a tiny sound and again clutched her ears in agony. "I am in control of you. I really wanted to kill you right here." Haku snarled, "Show me." "As you wish, die." Dosu screamed, but this time he did more than just flick his gauntlet. Haku was forced to take full brunt of the attack as the sound wave, which was nearly visible as it distorted the air, moved outward and toward her. The sound wave seemed to momentarily freeze her body. However, those who had a good enough view of her would have noticed that her body appeared to morph as the sound wave constantly changed the pressure surrounding it. Then, as the sound wave eventually vanished, Haku collapsed as though he was dead. Dosu let out a loud laugh at this, saying, "You fool. To think I was not able to kill you in reality." But then, right in front of him, Haku's body shattered, turning into nothing more than ice chunks with enormous fissures covering the surface like a spider's web. He felt a metal blade against his neck and froze, blinking. How? He questioned, unwilling to take a chance just yet. That would reveal a lot. Now give up, Haku stated icily. Dosu said, "How about no," as he moved to strike his gauntlet once more. But Haku would not allow this to occur, and with her other hand, she rammed two senbons squarely into Dosu's neck. His body froze for an instant before collapsing due to the instantaneous effect. Haku glanced to make sure she got him, then grinned as she turned to leave. "It seems I was right to worry about your skills." To the surprise of some, the Chuunin then showed up and declared the match in Haku's favor. It was extremely uncommon for a team to make it this far into the Chuunin exams and still have every member on it. Others, however, were not surprised at all because they were aware of the training that each team member had received. Dosu was soon taken off the field, and before the next round of matches, a pause was scheduled to allow everyone to stretch and catch up. This break, which gave them or at least Naruto's team a chance to think about the next match, was not wanted down in the contestants' box. Naruto was up against Lee, which was no easy feat. Haku and Tenten were facing each other, and their mental connection was going to make things difficult. It was difficult for them to fight fully, let alone spar. Lee was sleeping in one of the few chairs, seemingly indifferent to his next fight. The other competitor who was unable to advance to the next round had not gone back to the box. Kiba appeared to have undergone a mental breakdown as he went to sit with his teammates. Though no one was sure if this was a good or bad thing for Gaara, there was no indication. Now, Conquero and his sister were seated in a box high in the stands, reserved for distinguished visitors or the children of the current cages who had come to watch their genin fight. That being said, there is more than a little room for interpretation up in the cages box. The case cage was preparing for a fight, but it was not one he was particularly excited about. On the other hand, the Hokage was able to sense his fellow cage's tension rising throughout the match. Even though he tried to control it, the man still wondered, is something wrong? Looking back at the elderly man, the case cage replied, "Nothing really," but it was clear that he was not persuaded. "I know you better than that, so come on. Tell me what's not right." The Hokage inquired once more, appearing less like the Hokage of today and more like a grandfather. The case cage angrily remarked, "Again, there is nothing wrong," but the way he said it caused the Hokage to keep going. "Is it about the battle to come?" The Hokage suggested attempting an alternative strategy. When the case cage realized that the Hokage was using battle rather than matching or fighting, he almost lost consciousness. "What battle would you be talking about?" he asked after pausing for a short while to gather his thoughts and emotions. "You are fully aware of the subject I am discussing. Now, why are you soon to engage in combat?" With a light question, the Hokage seemed to be inquiring about the weather. "Because my village needs it to demonstrate our might before it goes extinct. Without it, we will be condemned to a slow death because our daimyo won't pay us any attention. Both you and I are aware that the daimyo of my nation is increasingly referring business to you, rather than forwarding them to us as he ought to." Gazing over Leaf Village, the case cage spoke. "We can't make it the way you can with just the village business." "I can always fix that, you know," the Hokage said, grabbing the case cage's attention. "And why would you do that when you know that I might not be able to stop my own forces till it is too late?" Confused, the case cage questioned. "Would you prefer that I let this fight go on and run the risk of your village being destroyed when the opposing village realizes how much strength you shed? Or, better yet, would you rather take a chance on possibly starting the next great ninja war or losing the favor of your daimyo?" Gazing closely at the case cage, the Hokage said. Well, gazing downward, the case cage saw the combat zone. "I am powerless to stop what will happen to your village and your children if you don't. When this village asks for compensation for the harm caused, the Hokage uttered, or if war should break out. The idea of losing a child nearly made the Kazekage wince. Even though he remained silent about how much he worried about them. With a sigh, he turned to face the Hokage and said, "Okay, I'll try my best." Then the Kazekage called one of his bodyguards over and spoke to him in a whisper. The guard regarded him strangely, then nodded and vanished like a tiny sand devil. "It is done, though I am not sure if all the troops will be able to be alerted in time," the Kazekage nodded as he turned to face the Hokage. "I understand, but by doing this we will be able to play up your help as a carefully made plan to help save your allies." The Kazekage smiled at the Hokage as he spoke. Gazing out over the field, the Kazekage remarked, "You play the political game well." "Yes, I am aware. You can reimburse me for saving your village after the fight." The Kazekage stiffened slightly at the words spoken by the Hokage. "How?" he asked, sounding a little concerned. "I need assistance training a few of the ninja. Naruto, Tenten, and Haku, the final 3 female candidates in the Chunin exams, are all proficient with wind nature charka. If possible, please assign them to a teacher who is at least somewhat knowledgeable in wind charka and justu," said the Hokage. At this modest request, the Kazekage sighed with slight relief, saying, "I can do that, but why not have Danzo or Yusun do this? I am aware of their proficiency with wind-based justu. Asuma and Danzo need to be doing things, or else I would have them doing this. Sadly, nobody else possesses the abilities we require to properly train them," the Hokage remarked. "While I don't fully believe you on that last part, I will see what I can do." With a faint smile, the Kazekage spoke. The Hokage, who was staring down into the arena, remarked, "Good, because I think it is time for the next set of fights to start." "Yes, and almost time for the battle. I would alert your troops while you still had a chance," says the Kazekage. "They are prepared already. After all, I have been aware of this conflict since the beginning of the month, so I'm more than prepared for it." The Kazekage realized he was fortunate to not have to battle the elderly man next to him when the Hokage answered back with a faint edge to his voice that nearly scared him. The Hokage gave the impression that he knew far more than he ever disclosed. The Kazekage looked down into the arena and then back out over the village. Before he had to stop his son, he might as well make the most of the little time he had left. After all, he was aware that this change in strategy would not succeed at all if he did not try to subdue the demon. Furthermore, he would still need to cope with the Leaf Village's demand for payment. He moved slightly in his seat and saw that Lee and Naruto, the 2 competitors, were now on the field and prepared to play. Naruto stood across the arena from Lee, trying very carefully to control her breathing and her worries. Even from watching his fight in advance, she could tell that his speed and skill exceeded her own. However, if he took off his weights, it would be nearly impossible to hit him due to the sheer speed at which he was capable of moving. She was also a little concerned about the abilities he had shown against Gaara, his first opponent, in case he applied them to her. She shook her head, dismissing the thought because it was best not to think about it too much. Lee spoke up before any of them made a move, as the Jonin signaled to them to begin. "If you would like, I can let you end this fight right now. Taking on someone like me would not be dishonorable." After blinking, Naruto shook her head and assumed a stance that said, "No way. I might not be up to par. However, there are situations in which you must confront your adversaries despite being outmatched in order to live or protect what you ought to be protecting." Lee said, "I understand this very well," and then he disappeared. As Naruto ducked to avoid getting in the way of the impending blow, she barely had time to blink. A moment later, Lee was back where she was, his leg flying through where she had been. Unwinding her tail, Naruto swung it in his direction, attempting to grab his legs before he could move. However, Lee was not going to be easily captured and moved aside as the tail concluded unfurling. Her tail swung toward Lee, who dodged back a few feet in response. In an attempt to throw Lee off balance, Naruto lunged forward, not allowing him to escape so easily. However, Lee sidestepped the lunge with ease and dove as her tail extended in an attempt to stab him. But as she brought it back towards her, he sighed. Jumped clean away, the spines along it attempting to catch him again. Turning to face Lee, Naruto stood up a little, though she remained slightly crouching. She sighed, observing the murmurs from the crowd. Even though she wasn't sure how much the village had heard about her change, she could be certain that now everyone would be aware of it. Well, it seems my secret will be out fully now, but I will not be beaten that easy. Lee merely nodded before resuming his attack. He did not disappear in a flash like he did before. Instead, he stayed in one spot, allowing Naruto to perfectly avoid all of his blows. This continued for about 15 minutes, at which point he made a move that required her to completely avoid his attack rather than merely duck or slightly dodge to the side. Lee's attack was another roundhouse kick, but this time, instead of coming to a stop as a punch, he vanished from sight. Naruto leapt sideways to her right, knowing that ducking this time would not work. Lee reappeared behind her and punched a crater in the ground after slamming his fist into it, proving that she was once again lucky. As she resumed avoiding his blows in the hopes of landing a fortunate blow with her tail, Naruto blinked, wondering why he had not tried that more frequently. Initially, she believed he was withholding something, but she quickly realized that wasn't the case. The only reason Lee could dishonor someone like that was because of the weights on his legs. There were still two issues. One was that he was tired, which was strange because he was supposed to be able to outlast her in endurance. The other was that he could only use that speed when using his charka while he had weights on. She was certain that the final one was the cause. And if he used these bursts at random, it could indicate that he was either low on charka or trying to catch her off guard with a surprise attack. However, her thoughts ultimately made her lose focus on her until Lee unexpectedly accelerated and struck her in the stomach, sending her flying. She managed to right herself as she rolled across the ground, landing on all fours and skidding a few feet while gasping in terror. She looked up, and just as she was about to turn away, Lee's foot landed where her head had been. Well, that hurt a little bit, Naruto admitted, taking a few moments to catch her breath before deflecting another blow from Lee. Lee gave her a few more punches and a kick, saying, "I never said I would soften up the hit, my dear lady." Because of her fleeting lack of attention, Naruto was able to growl as each of Lee's movements began forcing her back. She realized she was gradually being moved in the direction of a cluster of trees as she evaded a few more attacks. She was well aware that if she joined that group, she would undoubtedly lose because Lee could turn the tree into a fantastic place to bounce around in and launch an attack from any angle. She immediately switched strategies, beginning to deflect the blows rather than merely dodge them. She would then cautiously try to hit him back, though she was never able to do so. She managed to push him back. Lee then kicked her again for blocking. Naruto gasped in agony as the kick's force caused her bone to tremble. As the pain in her arm intensified, she let out a moan and chose to avoid the subsequent blows. Lee gave her a smug smile as she managed to leap away, but before he could launch another attack, a loud noise reverberated throughout the arena and stands. Uncertain of the source of the sound, Naruto and Lee paused and raised their gazes to the arena's walls. Nonetheless, everyone in the stand could see where the sound originated. From the gates leading into the Hidden Leaf Village, a thick cloud of smoke and dust was rising. Upon noticing the cloud, the Hokage rose to his feet and sighed deeply. He approached the railing and addressed the Leaf Ninja, his voice effortlessly resonating throughout the arena. The Leaf Ninja's mission was to repel the invading ninja and get ready for battle. As he and his own forces launched attacks at the Sound Ninja, the Kazekage stood beside him and nodded. Many of the Sound Ninja were slain before they even realized what was happening as a result of the Sand Ninja's abrupt alteration in their battle plans. Because of this, in the first few minutes of the battle, nearly half of the Sound forces were lost. However, despite this unexpected turn of events, the Sound Ninja managed to bounce back after the initial deaths of several members of their team. The real fight began after that. Rather than in the village itself, it was in and around the Leaf Village main gate. After this, it didn't take the Leaf Ninja long to arrive and begin assisting their allies in dealing with the remnants of the Sound Ninja. Furthermore, the main attacking Sound force at the gate was still making slow progress even though many of the smaller groups were destroyed in a matter of seconds. The commander of the recently established Sound Village led the group and killed any approaching enemies, giving his soldiers a slight advantage over the rapidly shifting battlefront. He was unfazed by the abrupt switch of the Sand Ninja Alliance back to the Leaf, as he proceeded to slice through anyone who approached with his blade. With a deep dislike for the situation, Jiraiya leapt to his feet and told the Sand and Leaf Ninja to move aside. Even the Sound Ninja froze in place as he entered the battle zone, seeing their leader call out to Jiraiya. "So my fellow Sannin has come to meet his death," the leader yelled, smirking a little, his sword still drawn and waiting for an assailant. Jiraiya looked at the person who had once been his friend and said, "Orochimaru, if anyone else shall die today, it shall be you." He refused to confront Orochimaru about the fact that he and all of his forces would probably perish if he did not depart right away. You see, that's where I have to disagree with you. Because I didn't come here with a single, easily out of the ordinary trick. He smirked and proceeded to flash some single-handed signs. Subsequently, he forcefully hit the ground with his hand before Jiraiya could intervene, causing a sizable seal to form beneath him and expand outward. However, Jiraiya was unconcerned about summons this time because the hand signals were not accurate for any summoning. However, this did not alleviate his discomfort, as he carefully retreated away from the seal. With a loud laugh that sent shivers down the spine of even his own ninja, Orochimaru laughed icily. At this, Orochimaru leapt skyward, the smoke filling the air, and Jiraiya blinked in shock, surprise, and terror as a large snake materialized beneath him. Although he was unsure of Orochimaru's actions, he was determined to prevent this massive summon from remaining in the area and attacking the village. Just as he pulled out his own summons, the creature disappeared in an even bigger cloud of smoke. Orochimaru fell to the ground, appearing a little miffed that this so-called trump card had failed so miserably. If things weren't so dire, Jiraiya would have been almost ready to laugh. He did hear some of the sand and leaf ninja around him laughing at their own failure. Then, as he moved slowly in Orochimaru's direction, a wall of golden colored sand seized him, pinning his arms to his sides and holding him. After blinking in shock and surprise, Jiraiya saw his teacher in the cage approaching him from the side. With an immense amount of power in his voice, the Hokage declared, "Orochimaru, you must surrender now or you will be killed." Orochimaru laughed and grinned, saying, "I'll go with option 3. The cage immediately moved to murder Orochimaru, but before he could complete the hand gestures, Orochimaru was enveloped in a cloud of smoke. After completing his hand signals, he crushed the person in the cloud with his sand a moment later. They noticed a sound ninja had been crushed in Orochimaru's place as the cloud began to blow away. They looked around quickly to see if they could locate him, but in a few moments they discovered he had completely escaped. Upon observing this, the sound ninja also felt it was appropriate to follow his lead and left before they could be defeated. A handful of the leaf ninja advanced in an attempt to apprehend or even eliminate some of the escaping ninja. However, the Hokage sighed as those slipped from sight. He could not help but smile at the scene as he surveyed what was left of the village gate. Even though it wasn't much damage, the village gate was primarily affected, and if that was the only significant damage, he would consider the day's fighting successful. After all, a sizable portion of the village was still unaltered. If there hadn't been a death count going on, the Hokage would have performed a joyful dance when the deaths were totaled at the end of the day. Attacks on Orochimaru himself resulted in 10 dead leaf ninja, but none of the ninja who assisted in removing the ninja around the walls perished. However, even though the sand ninja deaths were significantly higher, they were still relatively low. More than 75% of the sound ninja's attacking force was gone. The Hokage nodded as he turned to face the Hokage's tower after taking one last look at cage. "Come, we have a few things to talk about." Things on the Leaf were surprisingly quiet in the weeks that followed the invasion, at least as quiet as a ninja village could be. However, if one had known where to look, they would have noticed that the usually tranquil village was actually quite busy. The Leaf Ninja tripled their training so they were prepared for anything, even though they typically trained to stay in shape for missions or simple jobs. They were shocked into this by the nearly fatal invasion, which reminded them that even though they were thought to be the strongest ninja village, they were still vulnerable to ambush attacks. Even the Hokage, who used to hide behind his desk for days at a time, was training himself. Even without a fight, he could see that his legendary abilities had diminished. And even though Tsunade or Jiraiya could succeed him if he passed away tomorrow, he made the decision that he would not allow his death to be caused by the kunai of an enemy. Jiraiya went in search of Tsunade and informed her that she had to come back immediately or risk becoming a missing ninja. He was making it very clear that this was no jest. He knew she would come back without the threat. He took the necessary steps to ensure he would have a capable successor. As for Naruto and her group, they were now receiving training under the careful supervision of Temari, the daughter of the cage. She had just recently shown up to begin their instruction in using wind jutsu. She was aware of how much work they had put into the situation. And she quickly discovered that they had a solid understanding of the fundamentals of wind. sufficient to maneuver around a wind wall or air blades, but they were unaware of the subtleties of these abilities or how to manipulate them so that a mere hand gesture could unleash a burst of wind. Thus far, she has them honing their control and polishing their wind ability. Tenten, however, lagged far behind the other two because her Charka nature was not initially wind. As she watched them, she was amazed at how quickly they picked up the ability. The others would immediately learn from the mistakes made by the one who made even the smallest error. She couldn't help but stare at them in wonder. They had an aura of both alienation and humanity about them. Their tail or ears were more appealing to their cat than their hair, which had striking black streaks. Or the fact that the acidic nature of both their charka and blood was potent enough to melt metal. They appeared to have a telepathic connection, at least to her, in that they were able to learn from each other's mistakes. Lying on a rock near the field they were practicing it, she let out a sigh. She observed them practicing a new maneuver to gain more control. By merely swishing their tails, they were sending a tiny blade of wind. They were still learning it, despite the slow going. Despite her dad having given her the explanation several times previously, she was genuinely curious as to why she had been chosen for this assignment. As Naruto moved slowly back and forth behind her tail, she let out a sigh. Is something wrong, Temari? No, not at all. I'm just really bored right now. Your village is just too peaceful for my taste. Very little work needs to be done in order to survive day to day. Temari stated as she sat up and turned to face Naruto. To a visitor, I would agree with you, Haku said, glancing over. But if you stay here long enough, you will discover some highly intriguing things. I imagine you will get used to it after you've been here for a while. Yeah, assuming my brother is not found soon, Temari continued, exhaling once more. Worried about Gaara? Tenten finally asked as he approached. Both yes and no. He's never really acted like my brother, even though he is one. As you can see, he can typically take care of himself, Temari remarked, averting her gaze to the distance. Do you think he would become a missing ninja then? Gazing at her, Naruto inquired. Maybe, but I'm not positive. Sighing, Temari said, I hope not. However, since you're asking me questions, may I ask you some as well? Yes, Naruto sat down and replied. To start with, what makes you so unique? Is it a genealogical issue, or just two or seal gone awry? Temari posed a direct question. Well, to be honest, it's none of those, blinked Naruto. It was an incident during a mission that went wrong. On a C. Rank mission guard mission was my former team. However, we also had a D-rank side mission to investigate a space object crash site. A meteor? Inquired Temari. No, from what I could see when I looked into it, it was some kind of ship. Upon entering the craft by mistake, I realized it resembled more of an escape craft. However, the only thing about it that truly caught my attention was a broken tube coated in some sort of slime. I heard something as soon as I landed on the ground after leaving the craft. I was alert due to a year of attack prevention training, but I saw nothing at all. Naruto remarked after a brief moment of reflection. I'm going to assume you made the simple error of lowering your guard. Tenten and Haku both laughed a little when Temari said, and God by whatever made that sound. Tenten responded, yes, she did, recalling what Naruto had said to her earlier. Yes, that's correct. I took the foolish action. In any case, I was attacked by the creature, which lunged towards my face before latching onto me and putting something inside of me. My friend saved me from the creature hatching and killing me when it tried to escape my body. However, as you can see, the outcomes were less than human, Naruto remarked, waving her tail wildly. Just how much did you change? Temari inquired. I suppose it would be simpler to show you a photo of my former physique rather than to tell you. If not, you wouldn't believe it, though I doubt you would believe us even then. Rubbing the back of her head, Naruto said. Well, that explains you, but what about your teammates, and from what I have seen your sensei? Temari inquired. Looking away, Naruto blushed and said, that's something I'd rather not tell you. Temari, perplexed by the blush, said, why not? It can't be that bad, can it? It depends on how you define weird and bad, Haku said, shifting slightly and averting his eyes. Temari replied, all right, then, let's get back to work. Nodding, Naruto and her group went back to their tasks. Temari's question had been addressed, but some of the responses raised new ones for her. In the meantime, the Hokage and Veronica were meeting somewhere else in the town. She had only recently appeared a day earlier, appearing a little worn out but unharmed. He asked the female demon, glancing up at her, how her mission had gone. With a small smile, Veronica said, "Not the best, to be honest, but I was to convince them of who I was in the end." "That's good to hear," the Hokage nodded. "Could you tell me where they are?" "They're at Naruto's house right now. However, if it's feasible, I would like to request a house of my own," Veronica remarked as she pulled up a chair. "Come to me tomorrow, and I'll have my house ready just the way you want it." "Will you keep training Naruto and her group until Anko has finished using the war's captured ninja?" The Hokage asked to pull out some documents so that Veronica could sign them. As the Hokage handed her the papers, Veronica replied, "For now, yes I could, though the lessons might be harder for them than before." "Just sign these and I will get you your keys as soon as possible." "And what do you mean harder?" he questioned while glancing at the demon. Veronica carefully reviewed the papers to make sure it was not a trap, so she chose not to respond right away. "To be honest, the twins will be tagging along with me in well," she said after finishing, raising her gaze once more. "Well? It would be easier to say they will be putting them through the paces more than I will. Anyway, might I ask why you have the option for me to become a ninja of the village?" Veronica pointed to that section in the papers and asked. "To be honest, it's simple, that way, I can pay you for the services you provided," the Hokage said, lightly glancing at the papers, "and since it's for a ninja and not a regular person, it would be easier for me to either get or commission a house built. To put it briefly, it's a method of streamlining paperwork and completing tasks more quickly," Veronica remarked, "and acquire someone who can protect the village in an emergency. You're lazy but smart. Thank you. My only wish is that this work won't require me to do it for very long. This type of work is truly too much for me as I get older. In any case, sign and date the document, and I'll start working on finding you a place to live." As he handed her a pen, the Hokage said. Before signing it, Veronica took another close look to make sure there were no hidden surprises. As Veronica walked out, the Hokage grinned, looked over the paperwork, and said, "Get me Naruto's team." He then summoned a ninja. "I have given them a new task. Additionally, bring Anko and Temari." "As you wish, sir," the ninja spoke and then vanished. The Hokage produced a mission paper that required covering by someone. And it would be the task that offered Naruto's group the opportunity to establish their authority as the Chunin of the Leaf. While they were away, they also gave Veronica time to get settled in her new house. As he approached the window, he saw that the gates were undergoing a complete reconstruction. He sighed, sensing that the long years of peace he had known would soon come to an end. He gave that thought a shake of his head. Ultimately, the mere possibility did not guarantee that it would occur.
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.